All right, let's go ahead and get into all of this jazz, shall we? This is going to be fun. So we're just going to start off with this announcement that just came out today, and it'll lead us into everything else because we must start with the Venezuela situation. So we got Trump tells airlines Venezuela's airspace is closed in its entirety. In the latest escalation, Venezuela's government said it forcefully rejects Trump's claims about closing the airspace, which has turned out via any airline trackers that you guys pay attention to. The entire region of Venezuela is being avoided by airplanes. There's no planes in the air in Venezuela as of now. So this did take effect. President Donald Trump said Saturday morning that Venezuela's airspace should be considered closed as he wants to weigh military action against the South American nation. To all airlines, this is what he posted on his True Social. To all airlines, pilots, drug dealers, and human traffickers, please consider the airspace above and surrounding Venezuela to be closed in its entirety. Of course, in all caps, because he's one of those people that likes to shout in his text. Venezuela's government said it forcefully rejects Trump's claim about closing the airspace and that it was a colonial threat intended to undermine the country's territorial integrity, aeronautical security, and full sovereignty. It says a number of airlines began rerouting flights away from Venezuela's airspace earlier this month, and the U.S. Federal Aviation Administration has issued a warning of heightened military activity in the area. So what that's referencing, we didn't talk about it because at the time it really wasn't needed to be talked about, where there was an issue by the Trump administration saying that all basically private flights and all travel via public airlines, which they're not really public, they're private. We're not going to get into that conversation. Need to be halted in Venezuela, which for the most part it did. The only planes that were traveling out of Venezuela to the United States had to do with cargo at that point because there wasn't an issue. There wasn't a warning issued on those. Then following that, according to Today, not only was this basically extending that, saying all cargo planes need to stop as well, but then this was just a full-on worldwide issue of no planes should be going into the Venezuela airspace, and that took effect. On Wednesday, Venezuela's Civil Aviation Authority stripped takeoff and landing rights from 6 commercial carriers it accused of joining the actions of state terrorism promoted by the United States government, unilaterally suspending all commercial operations. On Thursday, Trump said that the U.S. could very soon begin targeting alleged Venezuela drug traffickers on land, expanding operations that have so far focused on vessels in the Caribbean Sea. That is one that we've been hearing thrown about for about a month and a half now. We've heard it thrice, somewhere in there, twice, 3 times. I think it's twice total, like official announcements about the possibility of going in by land, because we heard about the CIA was already in there. We already knew that. And then there was 1 and 2, I think there was 2 total, talking about possibly going in by land, either through Mexico or by boat onto beaches. So we'll see. They're throwing that around again. We'll see if they actually plan on doing that or not. But obviously, there's a lot of stuff going on with Venezuela, with the Maduro situation. We covered 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, somewhere in there, about the Machado lady, the Nobel Peace Prize winner, who has come out and said if you give her control of Venezuela, then she'll be able to sell off like $1.3 trillion worth of oil and minerals and all that type of stuff to U.S. private contractors. And then you go through her history, and she was funded by the CIA going back to 2002, was involved with Bush and Obama and Trump and Biden. She started doing coups and revolutions in Venezuela and everything. I got a video on that. Make sure you guys go check that out if you haven't. That'll probably give you a lot of information about what's been happening with Venezuela. But for today, we're just going to focus on the drug situation because bust out the popcorn, because this is a giant hypocritical theater situation happening. And so that starts here, which is a report that came out November 28th and says Hegseth order on first Caribbean boat strike. Officials say kill them all. As 2 men clung to a stricken burning ship targeted by SEAL Team 6, the Joint Special Operations Commander followed the Defense Secretary's order to leave no survivors. And so this is one of those things where Mr. Hegseth, or Keg Breath, whatever you want column has come in and said, we're going to bring back the violence, we're going to bring back the aggression, we're going to bring back the intimidation, and we're going to start doing things illegally. I just saw recently that in one of his writings in 2024, he asked the question of what even is the Geneva Convention, which is interesting because that's exactly how he's running his department, if it's his at all anyways. But basically what they're talking about is he came in, and at the start of this thing, September 2nd, the first strike that happened, he ordered a double tap, basically kill them all situation. So fire once, if you see anybody alive, fire again till they're dead. And so that's what they're covering in this. It says Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth gave a spoken directive. According to two people with direct knowledge of the operation, the order was to kill everybody. One of them said, a missile screamed off the Trinidad coast, striking the vessel and igniting a blaze from the bow to the stern. For minutes, commanders watched the boat burning on a live drone feed. As the smoke cleared, they got a jolt. Two survivors were clinging to the smoldering wreck. Special Operations Commander overseeing the September 2nd attack, the opening salvo in the Trump administration's war on suspected drug traffickers in the Western Hemisphere, ordered a second strike to comply with Hegseth's orders or instructions. Two people familiar with the matter said the two men were blown apart in the water. Some current and former U.S. officials and law of war experts have said that the Pentagon's lethal campaign, which has killed more than 80 people to date, is unlawful and may expose those directly involved to future prosecution. Now, this is something that we've covered a lot recently because we know that there has been a massive turnover of lawyers within the Pentagon and the Department of Defense who came out against the boat strike, saying that they believe that it could in fact be illegal and people in the future could be prosecuted and sent to jail, which nobody goes to jail. Everybody knows that, but still, that these lawyers came out, and these are the lawyers that sit on these councils in the Pentagon. They don't make decisions, but they go over the legality of things and give it to those who do make decisions, and then they base everything upon that. Well, the problem is we know with this administration, if you're not playing by their agenda, they don't even want you there. Pretty much 90% of the lawyers were then kicked out. They were sent out and fired because they were saying that this is going to be illegal. And then like 10% managed to get redirected to various aspects within the Pentagon, which has nothing to do with being on a council or sending warning or anything. This also goes along with the whole information about the 6 congressmen. All of them are veterans in some way, shape, or form, who said if you're a troop, you, by the Constitution, are not required to follow an unlawful order, which is completely 100% true. Now, Trump wants to go after those people because they're saying that they're causing dissident and all these types of things, which is completely false. They're just reciting what the Constitution said. And then we also know that like a month later after this, the 4-star Admiral Halsey, I believe his name is, Alvin Halsey, he basically put in his retirement papers because he doesn't agree with this, and he's been at war with Hegseth over all this stuff, and he doesn't want anything to do with it. I believe he'll officially be gone on December 12th. That's when that takes effect. So basically what we got going on is we got a whole stack of evidence that's saying this is illegal, or let's just say it what it is. It's murder. Hegseth issued a murder order to the military, and those involved with the military murdered those people. That's what's been going on. It also says the alleged traffickers pose no imminent threat of attack against the United States and are not, as the Trump administration has tried to argue, in an armed conflict with the United States. These officials and experts say because there's no legitimate war between the two sides, killing any of the men in the boats amounts to murder. Said Todd Huntley, a former military lawyer who advised Special Operations Forces for 7 years at the height of the U.S. counterterrorism campaign. Even if the U.S. were at war with the traffickers, in order to kill all the boat's occupants, if they were no longer able to fight, would in essence be in order to show no quarter, which would be a war crime. This report is based on interviews with accounts from 7 people with knowledge of the September 2nd attack and overall operation. The thing is, and if you want to take this from what should be considered like actual wartime due process as well as constitutional due process, is if you fired that shot and you blew up the boat and there's 2 survivors, you should have gone, picked them up, brought them into the country, and then gave them due process and interrogated them and got information and stuff like that. But they didn't do that. What did they do? They just murdered them because they realized that if they brought them in, there's a chance that their story may actually get out and it would prove to be unlawful and war crime. The elite counter-terror group SEAL Team 6, everybody knows about SEAL Team 6, right? Led the attack according to 4 people with direct knowledge of the matter who spoke on the condition of being anonymous because of the ongoing sensitive operations. Commander overseeing the operation from Fort Bragg, you're going to want to hold on to that name because it's going to be a recurring theme from here all the way to the end. So hang on to that. The commander overseeing the operation from Fort Bragg in North Carolina, Adam Frank M. Mitch Bradley, told people in the secure conference call that the survivors were still legitimate targets because they could theoretically call on other traffickers to retrieve them from their cargo. According to 2 people, he ordered the second kill strike to fulfill Hegseth's directive that everyone must be killed. It says also at the time of the September 2nd strike, Bradley headed Joint Special Operations Command, or JSOC, tasked with the military's most sensitive and dangerous missions, often working with counterparts in the CIA. JSOC, those that come out of the Joint Special Operations Command, they're connected to the Fort Bragg situation, but they're also connected heavily and working with the CIA. We'll get to more connections on that. They're also heavily involved with other task force all around the world. They've done a lot of heavy lifting when it comes to Middle East stuff as well. They also plug into the Mossad network as well when it comes to that as well. So this is JSOC, this is CIA, this is Mossad, this is other assets in other countries that they work with. It's a giant monster, to say the least. It is a monster and a beast in itself. There's a lot of stuff there, but I think we're getting the idea of what's happening here. This is a situation where stuff is starting to come out and things are starting to come out. Now, we heard a couple responses from 2 people, including Hegseth and then Sean Parnell, who's he's a communicator for the Pentagon. He's a spokesperson that's and a decision maker within there. And both of them have come out and called this report fake news and, the usual stuff of the media is lying and they're doing this and they're doing that. But neither one actually denied the claim that Hegseth gave the kill all order. They refuse to actually deny that. And so everybody knows a non-denial is not a denial. So that's something to keep in mind. They probably had lawyers come out and say, don't deny it. Do everything that you can to dance around it, but don't deny it, because if you deny it, that could be another strike with possible litigation in the future. So there's the whole legality situation there. Now, why this is important, because I don't know if people saw this, because this has been flying under the radar lately. ICC, or International Criminal Court, judges reject requests to release former Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte. Prosecutors at the ICC say Duterte was involved in dozens of killings as part of his so-called war on drugs when in office, first as the mayor of the southern city and later as a president. He is looking at a 45-year term within ICC prison for doing the exact same thing that Donald Trump is doing right now. I kid you not. This came out November 28th of this year. It says former Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte will remain in detention at the International Criminal Court after appeals judges on Friday rejected a request to release him on health grounds. The octogenarian is facing charges of crimes against humanity for his alleged involvement in dozens of killings as part of his so-called war on drugs when in office. According to court filings, Duterte instructed and authorized violent acts, including murder, to be committed against alleged criminals, including alleged drug dealers and users. The charges against him date from November 1st, 2011, when he was still mayor of the southern city of Davao, we'll just say that, to March 16th, 2019, when the country withdrew from the court. Estimates of the death toll during Duterte's president's term vary. National police put the figure at more than 6,000, while human rights groups claim up to 30,000. That's a he said, she said situation there. Families of victims hailed Duterte's arrest in March. So it's one of those things where he's literally looking at a 45, I think it's 45. I could be wrong. I could be getting that number mixed up. Either way, he's sitting in criminal court for crimes against humanity for doing legitimately the exact same thing that Donald Trump is doing right now. Alleged drug dealers, just bombing them, killing them, murdering them, just because. No due process, no international regulation involved or anything. He's just killing people. And so that's pretty fascinating that we have this situation happening here. Now, I know some people, because They'll do everything they can to stay within that left-right paradigm, continue to support one side or the other, the red versus blue, Trump versus Biden, Kamala, whatever you want to do. They're going to sit there and go, well, he killed 6,000 people. Trump hasn't done that. He's only done 80. Well, the question is a life a life? A life is a life when it comes to abortion stuff, right? We don't agree with killing those people. So when it comes to alleged drug dealers, which again, there has not been any proof given that that's what they're doing of trafficking drugs to the United States. There's been none. So the fact is they require due process. So anybody who's going to argue that, your argument's invalid. But it is fascinating that this dude is getting sentenced for the exact same thing Trump is doing right now. Then on the heels of that, when you want to talk about hypocritical, when it comes to this, Trump says he plans to pardon former Honduran President Hernandez for 2024 drug trafficking sentence. But I thought the whole goal was to fight the drug trafficking, but now we're going to pardon somebody who was heavily involved with it. How involved with it was he? President Donald Trump said Friday that he will be pardoning former Honduran President Juan Orlando Hernandez, who in 2024 was convicted for drug trafficking and weapons charges and sentenced to, there's the 45 years in prison. So my bad. I don't know about the Duarte dude. I don't know how much he's getting there, but 45 for this dude. My apologies. In March of last year, Hernandez was convicted in U.S. court of conspiring to import cocaine into the United States. He had served 2 terms as the leader of the Central American nation for roughly 10 million people. Now, some people are saying, well, this could just be a political hit. The leftists were trying to take this dude out when there was no proof about it. They went to trial. It was a jury-based trial, and there was a just extensive list of fact and evidence proving that he was involved with this, and he was convicted with a unanimous jury and sentenced accordingly. So keep that in mind when it comes to this. Jump down. It says the post was part of a broader message by Trump backing Nasri Tito Asfura for Honduras presidency, with Trump saying that the U.S. would be supportive of the country if he wins. We'll get to that in just a second. Asfura, 67, is making his second run for president for the Conservative National Party. He was a mayor of I can't pronounce that. You guys can read it, though. And has pledged to solve Honduras infrastructure needs, but he has previously been accused of embezzling public funds, allegations he denies. So not only is he involved with the cocaine trafficking, he's also connected to a bigger network. We'll get to that. But he's also involved with embezzling public funds. Trump has framed Honduras election as trial for democracy, suggesting in a separate Truth Social post that as Asfura loses, the country would go the way of Venezuela and fall under the influence of that country's leader, Nicolas Maduro. So Maduro is there, I believe at this point, while Maduro is a creep and he's a criminal and he's all these bad things, I think right now he's playing the part of patsy in order to advance a lot of things forward right now. Now, when I say that, again, I'm not giving him any leeway or credit or anything. He's a scumbag. We're aware of that, but that doesn't mean they can't use a scumbag in order to move things forward. They did the same thing with Castro, if you want to take a look at that. Still a scumbag, but he was a patsy and for things to move forward on a bigger scale. They do it all the time. So we have this, who's Trump's basically, he's being as hypocritical as possible, basically saying, we're just going to start killing all these drug traffickers. There's going to be no more drugs coming into the United States. We're at war with this. We're going to make this happen. But in order for me to do that, I'm just going to go ahead and pardon this dude who has helped traffic, I believe it's 400 tons of cocaine into the United States. And according to Trump's math that he used, because Trump's math is not math at all. Everybody knows that. His math is 2 + 2 = shoe. But he basically, according to the math that he does for drug use in the United States, 400 tons of cocaine would mean that this dude killed 5 million Americans. So we're going off of that. If we get a little bit more information, ex-Honduran president sentenced to 45 years for helping get tons of cocaine into the United States. A defiant former Honduran president, Juan Orlando Hernandez, was sentenced in New York on Wednesday. This was back in 2024, in prison for teaming up with some bribe-paying drug traffickers for over a decade to ensure that 400 tons of cocaine made it to the United States. Judge P. Kevin Castile sentenced Hernandez to 45 years in a U.S. prison and fined him $8 million. A jury convicted him in March in Manhattan federal court after a 2-week trial, which was closely followed in his home country. In a lengthy, exemplarious statement interrupted several times by the judge, who repeatedly reminded him that this was not time to relitigate the trial, Hernandez portrayed himself as a hero of the anti-drug trafficking movement. Somebody else in the Trump administration believes that as well. We'll get to that in just a second. Who teamed up with American authorities under 3 U.S. presidential administrations to reduce drug imports. This is why this is important, because you know who those 3 were? They were the last 3, which includes both left and right administrations, left and right presidents. Why is that important? Because we don't follow the left-right paradigm. This isn't a Republican and a Democrat situation. This is a corrupt government situation. And doesn't matter who's sitting in presidency, they're hand-selected, they're placed in the government, they're part of the cabal. Remember, there is no deep state, because that would give us the idea that there's a regular state that actually cares about us. They don't care about us. The deep state is just the state. It's just the people in power. It's just those who are following orders from satanic people. And so that's why this is important. That's why we recognize this. That's why we don't follow the left-right paradigm. It's just who they are. But the judge said trial evidence proved the opposite, and that Hernandez employed considerable acting skills to make it seem that he was an anti-drug trafficking crusader, while he deployed his nation's police and military when necessary to protect the drug trade. U.S. prosecutors say Hernandez worked with drug traffickers as long ago as 2004. That's, 3 years after the war on drugs began in the Middle East. Important. Keep that nugget in your head. Taking millions of dollars in bribes as he rose from rural congressman to president of the National Congress and then to the country's highest office. Hernandez acknowledged in trial testimony that drug money was paid to virtually all political parties in Honduras, but he denied accepting bribes to himself. So basically that's what he's standing there saying. All of those guys, all of them, they all took money, but I didn't. That's what he's claiming. That's his argument. Pretty terrible argument, in my opinion, on that. Worth noting that he's part of the right wing, they call it the right wing National Party, which is heavily connected to a certain cartel that, again, we'll get to in just a second. Now, if we take a look at this, adding on to it, let's take a look at Juan's brother, shall we? Former Honduras Congressman Tony Hernandez sentenced to life in prison and ordered to forfeit $138.5 million for distributing 185 tons of cocaine and related firearms and false statement offenses. Hernandez participated in the importation of at least 185,000 kilograms of cocaine, secured millions of dollars in bribes to Honduran officials, used heavily armed security, including members of the Honduras military and national police, and coordinated 2 killings, 2 murders. It gets cut off, but that's what that is. It says Juan Antonio Hernandez Alvarado, or Tony Hernandez, is the former Honduras congressman and brother of Juan Orlando Hernandez, the current president of Honduras. Well, not anymore. He's looking to get pardoned by Trump. Hernandez played a leadership role in a violent state-sponsored drug trafficking conspiracy. Over a 15-year period, Hernandez manufactured and distributed at least 185,000 kilograms of cocaine that was imported into the United States. Hernandez commanded heavily armed members of the Honduras military and Honduras National Police. He sold machine guns and ammunition to drug traffickers, some of which he obtained from the Honduras military. He controlled cocaine laboratories in Colombia and Honduras. He secured millions of dollars of drug proceeds for the Honduras National Party campaigns. Keep that in mind, National Party campaigns in connection with presidential elections in 2009, 2013, 2017, and he helped cause at least 2 murders. Hernandez made at least $138.5 million through his drug trafficking activities, money he was ordered to forfeit in connection with today's sentencing. Again, that was in 2021 that he was sentenced as well. You guys following along with this so far? So just in case I don't lose anybody, we're at this point now where Hegseth gave a kill order to just kill all alleged drug traffickers in boats from Venezuela. That's a part of his idea of the Trump administration's idea of cleaning house when it comes to drug trafficking. And so in response to that, Trump is coming out and said he's going to go ahead and pardon the former president of Honduras, who was involved with 400 tons of cocaine getting into the United States. Then on top of that, he's connected to his brother, Tony Hernandez, who's involved with the same thing, but with a bunch of other stuff when it comes to weapons, gun running, and murders, and all this type of stuff as well. So Trump is being as hypocritical as possible, saying we're going to kill all drug trafficking, and at the same time, he's protecting drug trafficking. We good? We following along? I hope so. Goes deeper than that. Let's keep going, shall we? Alleged narco president hires GOP lobbyist to sing his praises in Washington. This is April 8th, 2021. Everybody recognizes that dude's mug, right? Yeah. In April 2018, Florida Senator Marco Rubio tweeted out, "Thanks to Honduras President Juan Orlando Hernandez for targeting drug traffickers." Let's just see. Yep, there it is, Marco Rubio. This was April 14th, 2018. There they are. Just met with President Hernandez and former Minister Lara of Honduras. Thanked them for their support of the U.S. and Israel at the UN and targeting drug traffickers, basically making him out to be something that he actually isn't. It says, but one drug trafficker the Honduras president never pursued was his own brother, Juan Antonio Hernandez, or Tony Hernandez, who was sentenced to life in prison March 30th in New York and trafficking tons of cocaine to the United States for over 14 years. Testimony during the 2019 trial suggested that the president did more than simply turn a blind eye to his brother's criminal enterprise. Witnesses alleged that he was an essential part of it, accepting bribes to support his campaign for Congress and the presidency in exchange for protecting drug traffickers, which was proven in court with extensive evidence, and he was convicted by jury. It also says, but he also turned to friends of Republican Rubio for help. Early last year, he signed a deal. This again was in 2021. He signed a deal with the Washington lobby firm called BGR Group to buttress his image as a dedicated ally and implacable foe of organized crime. Although BGR represents itself as a bipartisan firm, it has extricable ties to the Republican Party. The company was co-founded by former Mississippi Governor Haley Barbour. Its current team includes prominent Republicans such as former Representative Sean Duffy. Hey, isn't he involved with the transportation side of the Trump administration now? Wisconsin Republican and Trump administration State Department spokesperson Heather Nauert, who is on the firm's advisory board. BGR has also given more than $1 million to candidates for federal office in each of the last 3 election cycles, and roughly 90% of its contributions going to Republicans. Rubio is among the top beneficiaries of BGR generosity and was benefited from the company's largesse throughout his career, including BGR-hosted fundraisers during both his 2010 and 2016 Senate campaigns and his short-lived presidential bid. So basically what this president did, Juan Orlando Hernandez, who Trump's trying to pardon right now, is during all of this stuff that was going on when he was getting accused, he hired the BGR Group, and the BGR Group is a lobbyist for the Republican Party and has sent donations straight to Marco Rubio, which Marco Rubio, as we can see right here, was praising Juan Orlando for doing that. If you want verifiable proof, here's the BGR Group announcement saying, "We are delighted that the government of Honduras has agreed to retain the BGR Group. Please accept this letter of agreement." And so this was basically saying that they will work in his stead. And on top of that, if you take a look at the recipients of the BGR donations, Marco Rubio individually listed as a candidate that they gave money to. The corruption keeps going. It just goes deep and deep and deep, deeper and deeper and deeper. Doesn't stop. It just keeps going. It's just total corruption because everybody knows total power corrupts absolutely, or absolute power corrupts absolutely. You guys have heard all that stuff as well. The fact is, when you're in government, it's just corruption. It's just straight corruption. You're taking bribes, you're doing favors for friends, you're getting people off the hook. You can be a hypocrite and so on and so forth, but as long as you're part of that cult of personality, as long as you're leading the charge in the face of the left-right paradigm, doesn't matter. Your cult following will continue to follow you like a cult, as they always have. And we stand heavily against that on this channel. For the regulars around here, you guys know that. For the new people around here, that's why we talk about some of the stuff that we do. We don't like to look at stuff biasedly. We don't like to look at stuff like that. We're not on the field playing the game or in the stands next to Jesus eating the popcorn. And we got to remember that. One of the people that also plays their part when it comes to propaganda, who is somehow, I don't know why, but he just is, quoted in churches and prophecy communities as being some type of upstanding source of information, is Roger Stone, who's a moron. And I'm just going to go ahead and say that because that's what he is. I had to censor this because he posted this today in response to somebody, because this was Trump's announcement that he was going to pardon Hernandez, some dude. I think he's from Texas. I don't actually know who that is, but I believe he's a Senate guy or representative from Texas, calling out the 400 tons of cocaine. And then Roger Stone says Hernandez was framed on the basis of the testimony of 2 convicted drug traffickers who the Biden Department of Justice released from prison in order to, in return for their false testimony, something off shorty. Yeah. So this is why I always talk about, make sure you guys are doing your own information, that you're checking the evidence and you're checking the facts and stuff like this. Because Roger Stone here, who pertains to the left side, to the right side of the left-right paradigm, is basically, it's just a lie. That is just a lie, because if you actually look up what happened in that court case, I recommend that you guys go do the same thing. Don't take my word for it either. Go look it up. You'll realize that that is completely false. Hernandez was not framed. He was actually proven to be a part of it. The testimony of 2 convicted drug traffickers was only part of the giant list. I think there's 30 something in all who gave testimony that Hernandez was involved with the drug trafficking. And then he throws in the Biden DOJ for good measure to make sure that he fuels the political hatred for each side. Roger Stone is one of those people that I see referenced all the time when it comes to the Christian side of things in the prophecy community. I think Alex Newman promotes Roger Stone as well as some bastion of truth and hope and all that type of stuff, when Roger Stone, again, is proving that he can't be trusted. And, well, Alex Newman can't be trusted either. I've proven that several times on this channel. But again, this is just straight up lies. That's why we need to go after facts. That's why we need to go after evidence. That's why we need to go after information. Again, we can only do so much, though. And I got to stress that we can only do so much. There's so much information out there that's just false and unverifiable that we just have to sometimes accept the fact that we're not going to get the actual truth of what's going on. We can get ideas of it, but we can't necessarily say, I know this for a fact. And I think that's something that troubles a lot of people. I think that's something that people stumble with, because I've seen it so many times where somebody presents a theory, the person goes, that sounds good, and then they're talking to their friend and they're telling it like it's in a verifiable fact when it's not. And so we got to be careful that we don't do that. But in this case, we do have court documents and evidence that does say, yeah, Hernandez was involved with that. So let's just keep that in mind as we continue to look through everything that's happening. We still good? Are we all good? All right. Let's keep going. We also have this. This came out, what was this? This was May 14th of this year, 2025. It says cartel family members entered U.S. in deal with Trump administration. Mexican security chief confirms. Video showed the family members walking across the border from Tijuana with their suitcases to awaiting U.S. agents. It says Mexico security chief confirmed Tuesday that 17 family members of cartel leaders crossed into the United States last week as part of a deal between the son of the former head of the Sinaloa cartel. I told you we'd be getting to this. There's a connection there. And the Trump administration. It goes on to say the family members of Ovidio Guzman Lopez, who was extradited to the United States in 2023, had entered the United States. Guzman Lopez is one of the brothers left running a faction of the Sinaloa cartel after notorious capo Joaquin El Chapo Guzman was imprisoned by the United States. El Chapo. Why is this important? How is this connected? Well, if you guys want to take a look at and follow the breadcrumbs of how this all happens, is Juan Orlando Hernandez was helping run cocaine for El Chapo's drug trafficking network. El Chapo's drug trafficking network is the front-running network that's connected to Maduro's drug trafficking network. You guys following it now? That's where the trail leads. These three guys are connected. Juan Orlando Hernandez is connected to El Chapo. El Chapo is connected to Maduro. So Trump, who's out there saying that he's fighting the war on drugs and to kill all drug traffickers that's connected to Maduro in Venezuela, is basically releasing somebody who is involved with trafficking Maduro and Venezuela cocaine, which the cocaine doesn't come from Venezuela. It goes through Venezuela. The cocaine is not part of Venezuela drug trade. And you have that issue of those three people being connected. And so Trump, he's saying he's going after Maduro, but he's releasing people involved with Maduro's thing. And on top of that, earlier this year, he released 17 family members of the cartel into the United States. That goes against the whole immigration thing that he's been doing. I can't even begin to tell you how absolutely hypocritical, corrupt this is. Will you hear this on mainstream media? No. Will you hear this on the right-wing media? No. Will you hear this in the prophecy community? No. You won't. Because they don't care about the facts and the truth of what's going on. They don't care about the deception. Why? They have an agenda to promote. They have numbers they have to meet. They have subscribers and book sales to worry about. Is there anything? Yeah. Continuing on. He believed that this was the case because the former cartel boss, whose lawyer said in January he had entered negotiations with the U.S. authorities, had been pointing fingers at members of the criminal organizations, likely as part of the cooperation agreement. It is evident that the family is going to the United States because of a negotiation or an offer that the Department of Justice is giving him, Garcia Harfuch said, who's the journalist who reported on the exchange or the family situation that's happening there. Pointing fingers and cooperation agreement at the same time while we got something going on in Venezuela, which it has nothing to do with drug trafficking. Again, I cannot reiterate that enough. Has nothing to do with drugs. And then at the same time, you're pardoning a dude who's convicted for being involved with the same drug trafficking network that's connected to Maduro, which they just, we talked about this as well, but they just announced as being a foreign group, basically, that allows them to start declaring war on them and all that type of stuff as well. That whole cartel, which isn't actually a formal cartel, it's just a name that the United States put on them so they're able to issue an announcement about it. It just keeps going. So the connections don't end there. I hope I'm not losing you guys. There's a lot there. Let's just I should have done a picture with everybody's name and how they're connected. Hindsight's 20/20, right? So let's get to the Tito Asfura guy who's running for president of Honduras, because he's been brought up, and I told you to hang on to that name. So this was released, posted by Donald Trump. This was yesterday. He said, if Tito Asfura wins the president of Honduras because the United States has so much confidence in him, his policies, and what he will do for the great people of Honduras, we will be very supportive. So we already got a problem here. This is international election interference. This actually breaks international law. Just imagine if another country did something like this to our elections here. Even though we know they're not elections, they're selections, you still got to play the game. These people play the game. Trump, he literally has the biggest platform, speaking platform in the world. President of the United States always has the biggest voice in the world. And he's basically saying, everybody in that country needs to support this guy if you want our help. That's just basic election interference. He already did it with Mayor, which in New York, which that didn't work either. But again, we know that dude was selected anyways, but that's a different conversation. Let's stay on task here. So we got election interference happening here. It says if he doesn't win, the United States will not be throwing good money after bad, because a wrong leader can only bring catastrophic results to a country, no matter which country it is. Tito will be a great president, and the United States will work closely with him in order to ensure the success with all its potential of Honduras. Additionally, I will be granting a full and complete pardon to former President Juan Orlando Hernandez, who has been, according to many people that I greatly respect, treated very harshly and unfairly. No, he got convicted. That's what he did. This cannot be allowed to happen, especially now after Tito Asfura wins the election, when Honduras will be on its way to a great political and financial success. Vote for Tito Asfura for president, and congratulations to Juan Orlando Hernandez on your upcoming pardon. Thank you for your attention to this matter, and make Honduras great again. Whatever. So he put that out there. Tito Asfura. Why? Let's just see. Just for fun, let's see what this dude's all about. Who is Nasri Afurda, or Tito Asfura? The Trump-backed Honduras candidate of Palestinian origins. Pretty interesting, but something doesn't add up there either. We'll get to that in just a second. Says U.S. President Donald Trump has announced that he's backing Nasri Asfura of the Conservative National Party in Honduras' highly contested presidential race. I hope the people of Honduras vote for the freedom and democracy and elect Tito Asfura president, Trump said on Truth Social. A 67-year-old politician and businessman, Asfura is running for the presidency for the second consecutive time as the standard bearer of the National Party. National Party again. Aligned with the conservative right, and whose past president, Juan Orlando Hernandez, 2014 to 2022, is serving a sentence in the United States on drug trafficking charges. Why this is important? Because Juan Orlando Hernandez confirmed during the trial and said that all the congressmen, all those involved with the National Party of Honduras, is connected to the drug trafficking ring. And what is Trump doing? He is promoting the dude that is connected to the National Party. Does anybody see the logical problem there? I do. I certainly hope that you guys do as well. He's promoting the next front runner for the drug trafficking ring that's coming out of Honduras. It's connected to El Chapo's network, which is connected to Maduro's network, and on and on and on. The circus continues. It's as simple as that. Let's keep going. It says he's also under investigation, along with other former officials from his administration in the Capitol, for allegedly being part of a scheme to embezzle public funds and launder money. That has not been confirmed as far as I can see, so I can't sit there and say that's what he's doing or not, but there's been multiple people that have come forward and saying that's what this dude's a part of. He also has said private investment is necessary to move the country forward, and his political agenda is focusing on jobs, education, and security. The private investment involved with the public funds and money laundering. That's where that possible connection comes from on that as well. A couple other things that's pretty interesting in regards to this is Asfura, even though he is Palestinian origins, he's the one that's says that he wants to bring the support back to Israel, which is important when it comes to this stuff because one of the people that's been involved with the drug trafficking out of Honduras is actually one of the top officials from the Israeli embassy. So we have that connection there. Now, that's as far as that connection goes. I tried to follow that rabbit or line of breadcrumb, whatever you want to call it, and it just stopped there. The person got accused of it, and he was under investigation, and then all of a sudden, everything went radio silent. So you could either take that as either the investigation found nothing, and he's free of it, which could be, or Israeli intelligence got involved, and they just cut off everything there. Which that could also be a fact either, or that could also be a fact on that either. I don't know which one it is. I can't find out. I'll just leave it there. Again, that's one of those situations where we can't say we know for sure because we don't. So we just got to accept the fact that we're probably not going to figure that out. But so there's that connection there as well. So take with that what you will. Either way, this dude that Trump is promoting for Honduras is connected to the same drug trafficking ring as the other people. And so round and round it goes. Then we have this as well. This was posted yesterday by Pete Hegseth. This was right before or following the report about him issuing the kill order for the first boat strike. It says, we have only just begun to kill narco-terrorists, except when you're pardoning them from United States conviction for trafficking 400 tons of cocaine into the United States. Except for them. We won't kill them. We'll pardon them. and promote the next one in Honduras as well. Make that make sense. I don't know. Do with that what you will. So that's the situation that's happening with the immediate drug trafficking issue that's currently happening with Venezuela and Honduras and all that. Why is this important? Why do we pay attention to this? Because the war on drugs has been a propaganda piece that's been going on for decades. I mean, decades. This stuff goes all the way back, man. You're talking 80s to 70s, 60s. The war on drugs has been going on since then. And it only started taking front page news, after 9/11, 2001, with all that stuff going on with 9/11, drug trafficking in Afghanistan, the terrorists in Afghanistan, all that type of stuff. That's when it started making front page news. And so the reason why this is important and the reason why I'm pointing out the hypocrisy and the corruption of the United States government has nothing to do with the fact of just going after one side or the other. That's why we don't look at it as the left-right paradigm. That's why we look at it as just the state. We don't look at the deep state because the deep state is just the state. That's why we look at it as a whole. We get rid of the paradigm, we get rid of the left-right, we get rid of the red and blue, we get rid of all those colors, and we just look at it as a centralized unit, because when it comes to drug trafficking, this is something that the United States government has been involved for a long time and will continue to be involved for a long time. It's one of the biggest money makers that the government has. And so it makes perfect sense why Trump was pardoned the same dude that's connected to the network that he claims that he's trying to kill in Venezuela. So if we go back in history, we have this. This is going all the way back to Afghanistan. Marines ignore opium, Taliban's cash crop. Marines in Afghanistan are not destroying poppy plants. In fact, they are reassuring villagers and plants won't be touched. This is 2008. It says the Marines of Bravo Company's 1st platoon sleep beside a grove of poppies. Troops in the 2nd platoon playfully swat at the heavy opium bulbs while walking through the fields. Afghan laborers scraping the plant's gooey resin smile and wave. The 24th Marine Expeditionary Unit moved into the southern Helmand province, the world's largest opium poppy growing region, and now finds themselves surrounded by green fields of the illegal plants that produce the main ingredient of heroin. Heroin. Keep in mind, heroin. This is back in the early 2000s. Poppy fields in Afghanistan for heroin. Keep that in mind. We'll come back to that. It says the Taliban, whose fighters are exchanging daily fire with the Marines in Garmsur, derives up to $100 million a year from the poppy harvest by taxing farmers and charging safe passage fees, money that will buy weapons to use against U.S., NATO, and Afghan troops. Yet the Marines are not destroying the plants. In fact, they are reassuring villagers the poppies won't be touched. American commanders say that the Marines would only alienate people and drive them to take up arms if they eliminated the impoverished Afghans' only source of income. It's kind of weird. We're coming over here to fight the Taliban. We see this. We know it's bad, but at the same time, we know it's the only way locals make money, said First Lieutenant Adam Lynch, 27 of Barnstable, Massachusetts. Why is this important? Because United States Marines, the United States military, who is connected to CIA units in Afghanistan during this time, were not there to destroy the opium that was getting flooded into the United States via heroin. No, they were there to protect the fields that were producing opium or harvesting opium to produce heroin that was flooding into the United States. The reason why this is making so much money and the reason why they were protecting it is because this is during the height of the opium situation in the United States that was through heroin specifically. And so the money that these Afghanis were making, that they were harvesting, sending it to the smugglers who were connected to the Taliban. And if you know anything about the Taliban was funded and armed through the CIA back in the 80s, if you want to take a look at that. I've talked about that in the past. And so what was going on was the money that the CIA was giving to the Taliban was to buy the heroin to ship into the United States. And then as it was being distributed, the CIA was making tenfold what they were giving to the Taliban. And the United States military was guarding those fields. The very same fields that produced opium that killed how many millions of Americans? If you're one of those people that didn't know anything about that, your bubble just popped. Go look it up. Don't take my word for it. Go take a look. This is just one situation in decades of what's been going on. And you're telling me that the CIA is not doing the same thing with Honduras, with Venezuela? Mexico is the key. We'll get to that in just a second. Continuing on with this, it says, in the poppy fields, 100 feet from the 2nd Platoon's headquarters, 3 Afghan brothers scraped opium resin over the weekend. The youngest 23-year-old Sardar said his family would earn little money from the harvest. We receive money from the shopkeepers, then they will sell it, said Sadhar, who is afraid to give his last name. We don't have enough money to buy flour for our families. The smugglers make the money, added Sardar, who worked alongside his 11-year-old son just 20 yards from a Marine guard post, its guns pointed across the field. Afghanistan supplies some 93% of the world's opium, this was back in 2008, used to make heroin. And the Taliban militants earned up to $100 million from the drug trade. The United States estimates And the Taliban militants earned up to $100 million from the drug trade, says the United Nations. The export value of this harvest was $4 billion, more than a third of the country's combined gross domestic product. Now, if we get a little bit more numbers on what's going on here, jump over here. Afghanistan's opium business boomed under U.S. occupation. We just covered why. This was August 20th, 2021. This is before the U.S. invaded Afghanistan in 2001. Around 82,000 hectares of Afghanistan cultivated poppy, the plant that produces opium, which can be turned into heroin and other opiates. United Nations and U.S. estimates put the current poppy crop at around 224,000 hectares, according to the United Nations. That number is up 37% from 2019. The U.S. spends $8 billion trying to eradicate the plant in Afghanistan. We know that that's a lie, only to watch it as it became the most profitable crop the country produced. So that $8 billion wasn't trying to eradicate it. That $8 billion was there to keep it going because they were making bank off of it. Afghanistan now produces 82% of the world's supply, according to the United Nations. Again, this was back in 2022. Like other U.S. efforts in Afghanistan and separately the war on drugs, the war against poppy is a complete and utter failure. No, it's not according to what they were actually doing. Not only did the Pentagon fail to eradicate the drug-producing plant, it created the perfect conditions for it to flourish. It says to produce opium in payable quantities, you need either a really effective government or you need to pay a lot of people to look the other way. Brazier said, our invasion created conditions for both. We destabilized the government and pumped billions of dollars into the country. There was plenty of ready cash around to pay off the people producers needed to pay off to look the other way. Yes. Because that's how the world works. Let's keep going, shall we? We're not done. Karzai's brother said to be on CIA payroll. This was October 27th, 2009. Says the brother of Afghan President Hamid Karzai has been getting regular payments from the Central Intelligence Agency, the New York Times reported on Tuesday, citing current and former U.S. officials. Ahmed Wali Karzai is a suspected player in Afghanistan's opium trade and has been paid by the CIA over the last 8 years for his services that include helping to recruit an Afghan paramilitary force that operates at the CIA's direction in and around the southern city of Kandahar. Ahmed Wali Karzai said in an interview that he cooperates with the United States civilian and military officials, but does not engage in the drug trade and does not receive payments from the CIA. The CIA neither confirmed nor denied the reported payments. Confirmed nor deny basically confirms. We can't, again, say that as fact, but that's usually how it goes. And it says no intelligence organization worth a name would ever entertain these kinds of allegations, the CIA spokesman said. So the brother of the dude who's involved with it is saying that he's been working with it, but he's not involved, but his brother is. That's basically what he's saying. Says the CIA's practice also suggests that the United States is not doing everything in its power to stamp out the lucrative Afghan drug trade, a major source of revenue for the Taliban, the Times said. In addition, some U.S. officials argue that the reliance on Ahmad Wali Karzai undermines the push to develop effective central government that would eventually allow the United States to withdraw. And of course, we know that they're all connected in establishing a faulty government, funding the faulty government in order to make bank through many different things. Drugs is just one of it, but there's the military-industrial complex, there's the minerals that they were mining in the country, there's the gold situation that was happening there, there's a bunch of stuff, but let's stick on drugs, because that's where we're at right now. But the fact is if you guys want to take a look at what's really going on with this, because the dates of this is important. You know how we just pulled out with that failed military attempt, or the failed military withdrawal from Afghanistan during the Biden administration, which was actually negotiated by the Trump administration and then fulfilled by the Biden administration. That's important to realize because, again, they're one and the same. There's no left-right paradigm. It was all a deal. Part of that deal had to do with the fact that the heroin drug trade had switched. It was still opium, but when that withdrawal happened, we had a switch of a drug problem in the United States. Anybody remember what opium in the early 2020s started taking over the United States? It wasn't heroin. It was fentanyl. Fentanyl started to take over the United States. People were done with the heroin. They started going fentanyl. The problem is the poppies in Afghanistan aren't used for fentanyl. No, fentanyl is created in Mexico. And so that got switched over to Mexico because the CIA is now funneling the fentanyl into the United States. And so they withdrew from Afghanistan because they didn't need those poppy fields anymore. CIA is the biggest drug runners in the world. It's clear as day if you're willing to look for it. Now, let's take a look at this. More than a dozen special operations soldiers at Center of Drug Trafficking probe. Just keeps going. At least 13 soldiers assigned to the U.S. Army Special Operations Command at Fort Bragg. There it is. I told you to hang on to Fort Bragg. It's going to be a recurring theme all the way to the end. This was 2023. At least 13 soldiers assigned to the U.S. Army Special Operations Command at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, are under investigation for drug trafficking. Fort Bragg is in so-called Corridor H, a designation from the Department of Justice of 8 different parts of the country in which drugs, particularly fentanyl, are heavily trafficked. Since 2015, there has been at least 16 drug overdose deaths at Fort Bragg, according to an internal Army documents reviewed by military.com. Of that, at least 2 were juror-enlisted soldiers training to become Green Berets who overdosed on cocaine laced with fentanyl. Deadly drug overdoses have spiked across the country since 2019, largely due to the introduction of fentanyl. About the same time that we withdrew from Afghanistan. I told you, timeline fits. The pieces fit. Deadly drug overdoses have spiked across the country since 2019, largely due to the introduction of fentanyl, a cheap synthetic opioid that is often mixed with other drugs. And again, the main place that it comes from is Mexico. In 2020, there were 91,799 drug overdose deaths in the United States, according to the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. And an internal review of Special Operations Command conducted in 2019 found severe issues with the ethics in the community, finding that the culture of elite units' extreme focus on mission accomplishments follows misconduct and unethical behavior to often go unchecked. There's also something else that sits at Fort Bragg that we'll get to at the very end of this thing. So like I said, hang on to that and we will get to it. Let's get a little bit more numbers on what's going on with Fort Bragg and the drug trafficking situation. This is coming from this year, 2025, how elite special operations troops created a drug cartel, a bizarre criminal conspiracy in the ranks of the United States Joint Special Operations Command at Fort Bragg. Again, JSOC. We talked about them. Who are they connected to? They're connected to the CIA. They're connected to the Mossad, and they're connected to the other groups, informants and whatnot in other countries that they work with. So again, it's a big network of people. It says, despite the drug war, U.S. intelligence agency have sometimes made common cause with rebel forces or client states that dealt in narcotics. Alfred McCoy's bombshell 1972 book, The Politics of Heroin in Southeast Asia, exposed opium-fueled proxy warfare in Vietnam and Laos. You know how I've said on this channel, if you've been around, you guys have heard me say this, that the whole Vietnam War, we never should have been there. It wasn't a real war to begin with. Ba-boom. That's why, well, one of the reasons why it's not always just about drugs. There's other things too. But the reason why we got involved with the Vietnam War is because it had everything, in this case, it had to do with drugs. That's why that's the whole thing. So all the people, and I'm not laughing at the situation. I hope you guys realize that. But the whole situation of how we lost how many soldiers during Vietnam had nothing to do with fighting for freedom. All those people died. And I know people who had family members die in Vietnam. They died for drugs. When you look at the Afghanistan war, they died for drugs, oil, gold, and money. It's hard because there's people who have family members in the military right now. And sometimes it's hard to hear that these wars that we're fighting have nothing to do with freedom. We continue to get fed that idea has nothing to do with freedom. Most of them die for personal gain of the politicians. And that's it. And in this case, Vietnam had everything to do with drugs. All those U.S. soldiers died to protect a drug trafficking network built by the CIA. It's hard to hear. But if you look into it, you'll see it. I think it's important that we hear that honestly, especially for those who don't want to believe it, because when you finally realize it and accept it, it's just another finger letting go of this earth. And it's another step towards wanting to go home and being with Jesus. So in 1972, the book, The Politics of Heroin in Southeast Asia, exposed opium-fueled proxy warfare in Vietnam and Laos, embarrassing the CIA. The Kerry Committee reported in 1989 did the same for the cocaine-funded operations in Nicaragua. Similar reports popped up through the long U.S. engagement in Afghanistan. U.S. troops themselves running a smuggling ring inside of America. Throughout the early 2020s, there was a wave of disturbing crimes related to the shadowy Joint Special Operations Command at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. HARP demonstrates that the government officials turned a blind eye as JSOC operators stole, killed, raped, and smuggled, shielding them from both the military and civilian justice. Why? Because good money coming through there. This is former U.S. military quartermaster Timothy Dumas and former police Freddie Wayne Huff were leading a criminal enterprise that brought together JSOC operators, the local redneck mafia, Puerto Rican smugglers, Los Zetas of Mexico, and even a former Islamic State fighter. Huff spoke freely to HARP about his crimes and his military connection from the cell in a federal penitentiary. He was the lucky one. Dumas, who had threatened to expose a giant criminal operation within JSOC, was murdered in the woods outside Fort Bragg alongside active duty Delta Force soldiers, our soldier Sergeant William Levine, in December of 2020. We actually covered that a couple years ago. We talked about that because there's a string of murders surrounding Fort Bragg. Although police have charged a local career criminal for their deaths, a patsy, every local that HARP spoke to was skeptical that the government had the right man. Many of them implied that there was a larger conspiracy. They killed him. From late 2020 through early 2023, 12 Fort Bragg soldiers were murdered or accused of murder, and some of these cases remained unsolved. The most infamous case might be the murder of Spec Ops Enrique Roman Hernandez, suspected of selling LSD. He disappeared in May 2020 during a camping trip. A few days later, Roman Martinez decapitated, head washed up on a beach. The case is still completely cold. Yeah, nobody's figuring that one out. Because this is how this whole network works. Drugs and money and conspiracy and human trafficking, child trafficking, blackmail. I mean, we're just We are literally just looking at the tiniest tip of the iceberg of what really goes on with this stuff. And so I hope people are paying attention to how deep and corrupt this is. Again, this is just a tiny bit. And if this is how corrupt just this tiny little bit of this iceberg is, imagine everything else that's going on. You want to talk about lawlessness. You want to talk about corruption. You want to talk about the sick fact that you have pastors pounding their pulpits for political pundits and icons on Sunday morning to get their sheep to start following this stuff. These people either have no idea what it is and they're just following the narrative and saying what sounds good to get butts in the seats, or these people are aware of what's going on to a certain extent. They're on the payroll and they're built to be propagandists. There is no left-right. Your vote means nothing. These people are sick, hand-selected puppets to do the dirty work that like we're going over right now. And shame on all the those prophecy teachers that continue to just cover for this. All of a sudden, now that Trump's in here and all this corruption's coming out, they're dead silent on everything. Why? Because they got a propaganda policy that they've got to upkeep in order to keep the church as deceived as possible. Shame on you. Shame on you. And when somebody comes out and starts calling out what they're doing, start going after them. It's ridiculous. Sorry. Didn't mean to get all worked up, but I'm tired of it. I'm tired of it. I'm just tired of it. They're not prophecy teachers, they're propaganda teachers. They don't care about speaking the truth. They don't care about giving fact. They don't care about staying away from deception. They like deception. It's warm and comfortable. Deception is the warm bed on a snowy day that wraps around you with the fire going that keeps you nice and warm, tucked in, and feeling nice. I don't know. I'd rather be the one slogging it through the snow.